The following program does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Reality Radio 101, its advertisers and sponsors, or its listening audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with psychologist, author, and speaker, Dr. Anna Baranowski, where mind, mood, and what matters to you are discussed. We're broadcasting live from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, on Reality Radio 101. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, your host of the Bear Psychology Radio Show, Dr. Anna Baranowski.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be back with all of you here again today. And we are very fortunate to have Dr. Douglas Flemons, who actually comes from Canada like myself originally, but is a U.S. citizen now. And so we are doing one of those cross-Canada-U.S. conversations, which I just love. Dr. Flemons has written actually quite a bit, but in the book that we're going to cover today, it is Empathic Engagement in Clinical Practice. Now, the thing that interests me so much about Dr. Flemons' background is he's got an extensive history as a professor emeritus of couple and family therapy at Nova Southeastern University. He's the co-director of a private practice and training institute, Context Consultants, and he has written quite extensively and learned about the work that he's doing through philosophy, neuroscience, clinical research, and he's integrated empathy into a lot of his work. So, this is something that I think we all need to be discussing, both if you're a patient, you're receiving treatment, and if you're a clinician, you're providing services, whether they're clinical services or you're a first responder, whatever your background is. This idea of the role of empathy in your work, I think, becomes a very important aspect of further understanding, why something might work or might not work, and where we may need to do some deeper reflection and understanding. So I'm very happy to have Dr. Douglas Flemons join us today, and thank you for being our guest.
Hey, thank you so much for the invite. This is wonderful.
So nice to have you. So, I guess one of the things that I wonder about is what inspired you to write this book at this stage of your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have written about empathy in previous books. To some extent, a major contribution to the books talking about empathy. And when I finished the book before this one, I felt like I wasn't done. I had so much fun writing that part of it. So I satisfied the itch by writing an article just about empathy. And that was so fun. I thought, hey, I could expand this into a book, and I did. So it's really just I couldn't shut up about it.
Yeah, well, there really is something important about the topic in general and how it kind of, without thinking about it, I think that we're at a loss clinically. It's such a kind of core piece of the work that we do. So you found it fun to write about empathy. Yeah, so can you, what was fun about writing about empathy?
Well, I should say, I expand that it was fun and incredibly frustrating as well. They sort of go together for me. Um, so I've been teaching about it, helping my supervisees with it for years and years. And so I had a sense I knew what I needed to do, what I needed to know in order to write the book. When I started digging into the literature, and the literature is extensive, I just got more and more confused because professionals, experts in different parts of the field, uh, hold very different assumptions about what it is and how best to employ it. And so as I dug into it, I just got a headache. That doesn't sound like very much fun. The fun was digging out from that, trying to get clear about, for me, how to make sense of it, and then how to position my understanding in such a way that I could demonstrate it for other people, teach it to other people, and make it easier to employ if you're a clinician and easier to understand if you're the recipient.
I guess that's where you draw from all of your stories and also some of the language that was first used that you then relate later in the book. I'll get into that as we go through it. But I guess when I think about kind of understanding empathy, I'd written a lot on compassion fatigue and the
Mhm.
impact of burnout and caring for others for many years myself as well. So I see these as not the same but related, and I started to really think about it earlier in my career because I could tell that you know when you start doing deeper work with clients, I saw it kind of like a double-edged sword. In a way, it was the care, it was the compassion that allowed me to work deeply with my clients. But then it was also that um, edge that meant that I could also be injured by deeply working with the suffering of others. So I wonder what your thoughts are about that.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up because working empathically can feel incredibly dangerous, and people do find themselves with compassion fatigue. Uh, some researchers have suggested that compassion fatigue is actually kind of a misnomer because if compassion is managed well, it's actually enlivening rather than fatiguing. So in the book, I ended up calling it resonance fatigue. If you're in the vicinity of somebody who's suffering, that of course happens if you're a first responder or if you're a therapist and you're working in an extended way, um, their emotional heightening or experience, whatever it happens to be, you're going to viscerally sense it just by virtue of being human and being in the same emotional zip code as them. And there's various ways that people have come up with to try to protect themselves from getting harmed. One is to be cold. The complaint about many medical doctors is they have poor bedside manner. Uh, I would suspect a lot of that is survival technique, an effort to not get too emotionally engaged as a way to not get taken down. But when you're a therapist, like you and I are, you don't have that option. And it turns out that that option doesn't work well anyway. It doesn't work for the patients, and it doesn't actually help the clinicians stay emotionally safe or engaged in their profession. They end up being more likely to get burned out. So the key is how do you manage the emotional connection with this other person in such a way that you end up being able to be as close with them, connected as you need to be for both the benefit of both of you, and then to be able to disengage at the end so you don't carry it with you. And so part of what I talk about in the book is how to empathically engage, but also empathically disengage. And then once you are in that engagement, how to manage whatever is happening viscerally for yourself, the sensations and so on, so they don't end up being a source of vicarious trauma, but of vicarious understanding.
I like your phrasing of vicarious understanding. And you suggested, as you were just talking, that it is not only not helpful for clients when you approach a client in a cold manner, but also not helpful to the clinician. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Sure. We got in, I'm presuming, but I bet I'm right. We got into this profession because we wanted to be able to help people. And so people matter. To close yourself off emotionally in order to be able to manage other people's suffering, you got to shut down, and that feels really empty and airless. So you can get through the day. It's a short-term survival tactic that's effective, but over the long term, you lose out on the ability to feel like you're making a difference, to care. If you can't care um, as a way of being in a caring profession, you're kind of caught in a double bind.
Yeah, I can see how that would kind of work against one's primary impulses in the goal and the driver, as most clinicians would have that as a major driver to kind of connect deeply in a manner that shows care. But, I also wonder, when you think about the full impact of this work. I read in your book that when you were in graduate school, the idea of your own empathy and potentially the impact on you was not really addressed. Why do you think that is?
Ignorance.
There you go.
Um, it's a good question. I don't think, as a professor, so I didn't get it in my graduate training, and as a
Neither
professor,
did I get it in
yeah,
my graduate training, although I spend a lot of time teaching regularly, week to week, and I I talk about these things all the time because I see it so clearly in the clinicians that I work with that
mhm,
it is clearly apparent to me that there are times when the work hits hard, even
it's
with
a
quite
toll.
skilled clinicians.
Yeah, but I must say, I should comment on my own ignorance too. For most of my career, I did live supervision. I'm behind a one-way mirror with a team of six supervisees, six students, and one of them's in the room with a client family, couple, whatever, individual, and I'm watching from behind the one-way mirror, seeing what works, what doesn't. And it took me far too many years to realize what you're saying is that the students were struggling. So I guess it was feedback from one student in particular comes to mind, but more than one, saying, this is really, really hard. And and we're going home with our suffering. And I've had clients who are therapists as well who were coming to me with symptoms that reflected their client's symptoms and feeling like they were going crazy and not being able to draw a boundary between themselves and their clients. So that too gradually woke me up. I wish I'd gotten there much sooner. But
I,
recognizing there needed to be a strategy for how to connect empathically in a safe way, and then how to disconnect in a respectful way and be able to be prepared to go into the next session feeling yourself again.
yeah, it's my impression that if we're not prepared to truly be in that ever-present moment with a client's um, experience and deeply enter it, that we kind of fail the clients, but we fail to actually get access to what we need to work with, that content that will allow for that alleviation. And of course, it can be very hard work. I mean, it would be ridiculous to say it is not. But along with the work that clinicians do, I want other practitioners who work in human services to whatever degree to recognize that this conversation is for you as well. Because
yeah.
I think that in many professions, we bring our full care and compassion, um, it, and it bears fruit, because there is that feeling of, when we are seen and heard and really witnessed by another, the kind of present kindness of that is something that can't be replaced with anything but, that human present kindness, which is profound. I want to just mention to our wonderful listeners, if you have questions or you want to join the conversation, you know that you can reach us at instudio101@gmail.com. And please do let us know if something comes to mind, if you have a thought, if you have an experience or something that you'd like to contribute. As you all know, I think the conversation that we have with you is incredibly important, and I welcome it as well. So, I am really kind of convinced that there's something crucial about this whole conversation. And it's interesting that you were saying it took some years to get to a point where you could really see what was happening with the clinicians that you were working with. What happened to your clinicians as you were able to witness what they were going through? Like, what happened with their clinical growth and advancement as you were able to recognize their struggles?
Well, one person in particular comes to mind who had had a traumatic experience with a client before she came into our doctoral program, and the way that she'd managed, and then she had a very uncaring, blasé supervisor who didn't take into account what she was suffering with, and the way that she'd managed it after that was basically to close herself off. And she was incredibly bright and incredibly good, but it was difficult for her. She came into the doctoral program full of promise, and she's still feeling burned out and not safe. So, in figuring out where she was, how she was trying to manage the complexity of that close relationship of empathic connection, I realized she's got to have a way to be able to undertake this that feels emotionally safe. Otherwise, she has to stay back, and she's going to be much more, as you said so well, you're going to be much more effective if you're able to project your imagination into the other person's experience. And so we explored that with her, but also in the practicum. And that was probably a turning point, figuring out how to talk about empathy and then how to practice it in a way that seemed doable, and you could see the results for her by the end of the semester. She had light in her eyes.
That sounds beautiful. It kind of makes me wonder, rather than just the year of practicum, what happens after decades of sitting with other people's stories. In my practice, I and the clinicians that work with me, we focus almost primarily on trauma, not entirely, but very largely. That is the focus, and the large number of our referrals to the practice, we deal with trauma. And I wonder, from your perspective, after decades of sitting with people's stories, how does this, your words, empathic engagement, shape you as a person, not just as a therapist?
That's a great question, but I want to answer it first by saying I want to distinguish the empathy, and also compassion. Because a lot of people approach compassion, the root of the word compassion means to feel or suffer with. And so in order for me to be able to do a good job being compassionate with you, I have to feel your pain with you. That's also the root of the word sympathy, except sympathy is from Greek, compassion from Latin, but same roots, to feel with. And when that happens, there's a kind of a mutuality to the emotional experience, and it can be devastating. But compassion, the way it's practiced, at least within Buddhist traditions, doesn't require you to feel exactly the same as the other person. Paul Bloom, some years ago, wrote a book against empathy, and he was critiquing this idea that it's somehow helpful for us to be as emotionally fraught as they are. And I totally agree with him, except I disagree with him then defining that as empathy. From my perspective, that's feeling with. It's sympathetic resonance that he's against, and I'm against that too. It is possible to work compassionately, to be available to feel. You allow for the possibility of feeling pain, but you don't hold the belief that you have to feel the pain like the client is feeling it in order for you to be able to make the connection. With empathy, what you're wanting to do is and uh, to viscerally understand their experience, to be able to rely on your body to help you get into the logic of their world. It doesn't require you to be as in such a difficult place as they are in order to be able to do that. You just have to allow for the possibility that you'll feel deeply. And then you're using your understanding or your passageway into their world, your imagination, in order to use your body's reaction to help you better know what they've been going through, what they're currently experiencing, what they've had to deal with in the past. It helps to light the way. Um, oh, sorry, I thought I lost you.
No, I'm
Um,
right. I'm right. I'm totally right here with you. So
but
I was getting that, just this idea of appreciating their experience rather than having their pain basically devastate you, I guess.
yes, and you understand their pain not to bring it back into your world to try to make sense of it. Like, man, if I were going through what they went through, that would absolutely undermine me. I can't imagine how they could have done that. That, I think, is a problematic approach to empathy. It's what I call analogy-based empathy, that I'm going to understand you by comparing it to what it would be like for me if I were in those circumstances. I'm going to be empathic by putting myself in your shoes. But there's a way of doing empathy where instead of doing that, I'm metaphorically understanding. That is, I'm letting go of me and I'm simply imagining myself as you. And as you, I'm then seeing, feeling, sensing what it is that you've been going through, what you went through during a traumatic time, what you're still resonating with. And I'm experiencing it in my imagination as if I were you, which makes it possible to infer stuff and to offer that for checking out with the client to see if you've got a handle on it, a grasp of it, allowing them to feel deeply understood and recognized. But you're feeling as the other person, not as yourself. So at the end of that session, you're coming back into yourself. So I say all of that to then answer your question, what does it mean for me as a person? That for me to be there for my clients, to be fully there, in a sense means leaving myself behind, leaving my history behind. Doesn't matter what I've been through. Uh, all I'm interested in is making sense of, grasping the significance, the um, the ripple effects of whatever they've been going through, how they make sense of it, the choices they make because of it, the actions that they undertake to make to make sense of that from inside of their world. That's how I'm fully there for them. And my own history and all of that becomes irrelevant in that process.
You know, often in the work that I do, I take a somatic approach where I want the client to have a kind of curious, open, compassion experience with their own inner lived body sensation and a perception of what they're experiencing, a
Yeah,
friendliness toward their own inner experience. And I ask of myself to be present enough to bear witness for that. But I
yeah,
never imagined that I could ever even come close to what the client themselves is encountering, given the direct um, encounter. And it makes me think about this example you gave in your book, which was really a great example of a clinician in training who decided that they were going to um, raise their own loss of a father with a teenager who had lost his father tragically. And it turned out to be like the great failure. The child says, you know, like, you don't understand anything. Like, you know, I don't know even know why you're telling me about your dad dying. This has nothing to do with me. You don't get me at all. And a kind of rejection of the clinician after the clinician had tried to use their own story. Tell me why you think that was such a failure.
couple of reasons. Uh, we all recognize that our experience is unique. So client comes in and they're suffering. Often they're coming in with people not having understood them, and so they feel incredibly isolated in it, alone, and idiosyncratically uh, placed, very, very unique. So therapists, in a very well-meaning way, wanted to try to make a connection by saying, "Hey, I get you. I've been in a similar place," um, and to try to make a connection so that the teenager could accept him as a clinician that he would allow into his world. But in so doing, he says, "You've got uh, a experience that's not unique. In fact, loss of a parent is so prevalent it actually happened to me." So it becomes a discounting for the client of the validity of their experience. It's not all that special. And then he's trying to prove to the teenager, um, I get you. And with that claiming, I get you, and therefore please listen to what I have to say, because then I'm going to steer you and help you through this. He precedes whatever he has to offer with this claim, and it makes it possible for a teenager whose job is to look askance at anything that an adult is offering, particularly an adult that his mother dragged him in to see. And and this claim, I get you, is easily countered. No, you don't. And the clinician, not experienced enough, decides to win the argument by reassuring him, oh, but I actually do. And if he can be more convincing that he gets him, the teenager will go, oh, you're so right. Oh, I was wrong. Yes, you actually do get. And of course, that goes nowhere because the integrity of the client is important. And you got somebody that's trying to help by imposing himself on the client instead of making himself available. And so, teenager has to discount the claim in order to stay whole, in order to stay unique. It's not safe to have somebody know you unless you allow them in. And if they're trying to bang down the door of yourself in order to get there so that they can be helpful, your job is to put up a wall to not let them near you because it feels like it could overwhelm.
What do you
So,
think the clinician could have done to more closely align with and bear witness to this youth who was suffering with such a tremendous loss?
Well, he could have done something off the bat that would have been very different. But let's start with that he made the mistake of claiming that he understood. Let's start there. What he could have done differently when the kid says, "You don't get me. You're so what? It has nothing to do with me. You don't get me at all." He could have then said, "Oh wait, whoa, you're absolutely right. My loss was mine. Your loss, that's your dad. You just lost your dad. That's just overwhelmingly horrible. You're right. I don't get you." And I think that that's a position to hold for all clinicians to hold all of the time, humility, that I don't have a clue what's going on for you. You said earlier that when you've worked with people, you bear witness to them, but imagining the hell that they have been in, that's, you can imagine it, but you never get there. And that's true about empathy. You don't arrive at a knowledge of them. You arrive at inferences. You arrive at imagined scenarios. And then the key is you check them out with humility. I talk in the book about using a Canadian cadence when you're offering empathic uh, hunches that so you've been through a lot. You don't presume to know. You offer it as a possibility, and you allow the person to either agree with you or discount what you've just said. And when they discount it, you agree with their discounting, and then you make adjustments so that they can get to the place where they agree with you. When they agree with what you're offering, now they're saying it's safe for you to hang out with me, to bear witness, and I will start to treat you like an insider instead of an outsider. That's what we're aiming at. But we can't get there by trying to barge down the doors by claiming understanding. If we back up from the mistake that he made in terms of the claim, what he could have done off the bat was to make an empathic statement. I hear you lost your dad. That totally sucks, man. Something, fairly vanilla, but making a statement about it's horrible.
I
And
love the way you said that because even as you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, if I was in a room with somebody who said something like that and they knew that I had just gone through a terrible loss, it's kind of like an invitation to let me know you're actually just here for me.
that's right.
That's pretty profound. I want to move to some of the emails that we're getting because I have a whole list of them right now. So I want to make sure that we're inviting our listeners to be part of this conversation, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
So this one is from Jake. Thank you very much, Jake, for this email. It says, "Good afternoon. Great topic." Yes, it is a great topic. It's very rich. Jake says, "Isn't it very hard to have compassion as a mental health professional towards a client or patient? Aren't we taught to not get emotionally involved? So how does that work?"
Yeah, you probably have been taught to not get emotionally involved as a survival tactic, and that compassion is dangerous. I would say sympathetic resonance is dangerous. So, whoever was teaching you, if they had put it that way, I would say absolutely. But compassion, sympathetic resonance happens to us. If we're in the same room and you're suffering, my brain is going to fire in similar places that your brain is firing, just as a function of our humanity, and that's sympathetic resonance. There's nothing inherently therapeutic about that. Compassion is more of a choice. You choose to compassionately connect with someone, and because it's a choice to move forward, you can also make the choice to move back from it later. To to be compassionate is to feel the pull to make a difference in somebody's life. With sympathy, You might send a Hallmark card or something. I feel so bad for you. But with compassion, it moves you into agency to do something. And I don't know how to be a mental health or physical health provider without a commitment to making a difference. And that means emotionally um, wading into the person's experience. Doesn't mean to be resonant with them, but it does mean to be able to feel your way in. I think of empathy as developing the sense and sensibility of the person. You're using your sensory body's capacity to help you make sense of their experience.
I want to move to another email, and I want to relate to something you wrote in the book. This one is from Joanne, and Joanne says, she asks, is the book an easy read for lay folks? So what I want to point out is, well, first of all, I think anything's an easy read if the topic is of great interest to a person. But I'm going to just relay my experience, that there were, quite a few very relatable examples that made kind of reading through, easy because it had a very human quality to it. For example, in chapter 1, the invention, evolution, and differentiation of empathy, Dr. Flemons writes about a couple who went to visit a friend of theirs whose spouse had died. And this is this story where the friend who's visiting kind of is horrified by her own pain and grief that she feels when dealing with her friend whose spouse had just died. So Graham and Sharon were married for 35 years, and Sharon died, and Carolyn was visiting Graham with her spouse, and she looks at Graham and sees his grief, and she looks at her spouse, and she realizes that one day either her or her husband may face a similar loss, and she's really struck by the devastating sensation of this. It's almost like for her, seeing Graham evoked a level of pain that was very personal. So my answer to you, Joanne, is the book is filled with stories like that, and I think that actually helps us to kind of read through it and really deeply understand what you are reaching for. And then I also want to say, in terms of that example, it was very pivotal when I was reading it. I was very struck by how emotion outside of the clinical room can have a very profound contagion effect. And this is not with people who are trained to be empathic, but it is a human capacity that we all have. And maybe you can talk about that quality that we all have naturally.
Yes, I will. And maybe I should weigh into whether it's an easy read. It's definitely not a beach read. And I've done my best to make it as available, as reader friendly as possible, telling stories and so on. I appreciate you saying that. But it's also deeply researched. And so the stuff that I say, the points that I make are grounded in philosophical literature and scientific literature in order for you to be able to trust what it is that I'm offering. So I don't know that it would be easy read, but I hope an engaging read. Now I can't remember the question. What did
That's
you ask?
okay. I'm gonna actually move on because there's so many interesting questions, and I think we've
Okay.
kind address that, which was basically, is it an easy read? So this is such an interesting question. This is from Sherry in New York City, and I don't know if you can explain this, but in Buddhism, the second arrow is a famous parable that distinguishes between unavoidable pain, the first arrow,
Yep.
and self-inflicted mental suffering, the second arrow. And it teaches that while difficult life events are, they are impossible to avoid. We all experience these things. How we face it is something that we can shape ourselves toward. So I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit to this second arrow matter.
Yeah, so that's a great point. When we're encountering the pain of somebody else, that's first arrow stuff. If we're there bearing witness to the person's suffering, um, and we're acknowledging it, we can feel pain doing that. It becomes problematic. The second arrow is when we determine that there's something wrong with or something overwhelming about what's going on for us. And we're then wrestling with our own experience, trying to manage it in order to come back and be present for the client. So if they're in a very horrible place and we're experiencing that, and then we get anxious about where they are, and then we're thinking, I can't feel anxious because I'm a professional, so I've got to somehow grapple with that. We're already a couple of steps removed, and we're suffering as a result of how we're suffering in relationship to them.
Oh,
So,
so beautifully put. Oh my goodness,
mm,
that's so beautifully. I I just know that you've done a ton of supervision by how you just handled that, because that is what comes to the surface. That
yeah,
is exactly what comes to the surface. And it is so, especially, as we kind of encounter um, clients that embody something that comes alive within inside of ourselves. Does that make sense to you?
yes, uh-huh, yes.
Right.
And then I guess underpinning a lot of these questions is it possible to be able to safely feel when you're around somebody that's suffering? There is in the culture sort of this worry that emotions are somehow dangerous. But within a Buddhist tradition, if you respond to an emotional experience that you're having with acknowledgement and acceptance, it doesn't stay. The word emotion is E means through or out, and motion is motion. Emotions move through us, move out of us. And so if we don't try to stop them, if we don't try to control them as a way of trying to stay safe, they can inform our knowing without sticking around and undermining us. And that's where acknowledgement, you've used so beautifully a couple of times, the notion of bearing witness. That's where it comes from. You're not trying to put a boundary up between you and the emotional response of the other person or your own in order to stay safe. You are there for it, you allow for it, you experience it, and you allow it to move through you. And then you're still breathing and you're still okay.
That's beautiful. Oh my goodness. We have some people asking about where to get the book. So, I mean, obviously the book is available through Amazon and it's an APA publication. Can you tell people where to get the book? Is it also on audio by any chance?
No, it's not an audiobook, at least not yet. I don't know if there's plans for that. Yes, Amazon, all the major booksellers and independent bookstores also can get access to it. So,
Beautiful. What about therapist self care? And I'm now going to reference a very interesting exercise that you put into the book, because there's a whole chapter on practicing therapist self care,
yep,
and you included a welcome to the party meditation. It was Jeff Warren's meditation, and I believe Jeff Warren is a Canadian meditation
he
teacher.
is. Yeah, wonderful.
And uh, it is a really well kind of laid out meditation. I'm going to walk through the elements, and maybe you can tell us what makes this practice so effective as a therapist self-care strategy. And it
Sure.
goes like this, something like this for people who are listening. Everyone is welcome. You are an affable host. So happy to see you. You welcoming the insistent thought, welcoming the annoying sensation, welcoming the distracting sound. There are no enemies in this meditation. So, what would make something like that, which seems so simple, so effective?
So much of human relating has to do with managing a boundary between self and other. And that is between people, but it's also within. So, between people, if you encounter somebody that you disagree with or that you find substandard in their views or their political stance or something, you define a boundary that distinguishes you from them. And your integrity is in part defined by, I would never do that. I would never vote for that person. I would not make the choices that you've made. And your sense of self feels protected by virtue of your judgment against somebody else. That also happens inside. So something occurs to you, a memory of a traumatic experience or a dream or just a horrible sensation, and there's a judgment against it. This feels horrible. This is bad. This is dangerous. I hate this. Some version of holding myself, a sense of self, apart from what it is that's coming to visit me. So Jeff Warren's lovely meditation, with all of the humor that he brings to that, shifts the relationship between awareness and experience. So instead of arming up against or protecting by shielding, and that shielding defining a sense of self that tries to stay inviolate by virtue of being separate, rather than trying to create safety that way, to alter the relationship between self and other and realize you don't have to stay safe by staying apart. You can stay safe by allowing connection. So if there are no enemies, you are acknowledging whatever it is that shows up. You're not demanding that it do anything. You're not attempting to control it. And you let go of the idea of control as a means for safety, and you discover that instead you can arrive at coordination. There's a way of moving with, and then, as I said earlier, allowing for whatever it is that shows up to move through. That shifts your sense of self and what's required in order for you to feel safe and whole.
Beautiful. I've got a real jump off question. This takes us in a slightly different direction
Okay,
because why not?
sure.
This is from Steve, and the question is how do you, so I mean, thinking about it from the context of empathic engagement, Steve asks, hello everyone, how do you handle someone who always plays the victim? How
Yeah.
do you bring that in?
So there is in that question an assumption that the status of victim is a strategy. And it might be an unconscious strategy, but there's a inherent in the question, there's sort of a resentment about the person positioning themselves in this way, and it makes it incredibly difficult then to offer any sort of statement or criticism or request because the person will experience it as this is one more instance of you piling on to me. So it can get incredibly frustrating. If you start with the assumption that they're playing the victim, then you're also thinking, well, they could do something else. They're just choosing this as a means of managing our relationship, and that then puts you in contention. An alternative way to start would be to say or to think the person is finding themselves feeling victimized, and that identity as victim is informing all the choices that they're making. And so I've shifted away from it being that they're playing it as a strategy to it being, well, maybe it's a life management strategy that's not consciously undertaken, but is, at this point at least, a necessary way of staying safe. That anything else feels impossible. They don't feel like they have the agency. They don't feel like they have the wherewithal to be able to do anything proactive or productive. They're withdrawing, and in that withdrawn place, um, requesting in all of their actions and their statements, please don't hurt me. So if you start with an appreciation of how important their stance has been at least for maintaining safety, you realize you can't shift them from that positioning through criticism because it will just be, and that's the frustration typically of the, you try to comment on it in any sort of critical way and they take it as this is one more example of you can't handle me and you're so mean and all of that kind of stuff. So you can't go in with an effort to change it. But like clinicians, what we do is we start by saying, let's just make sense of it. No push for it to be different. Let's just make sense of it. And if you can then, in your imagination and in conversation, uh, explore that person's experience such that you're coming to a appreciation of how their sense of being a victim makes sense in their life, you've changed the relationship between the two of you. The word victim originally means sacrificial being or sacrificial animal, sacrificial being. So there's nothing more helpless than somebody planning on sacrificing your life for the benefit of their God or something. So the ultimate helplessness. If you can find your way in through your imaginative curiosity into appreciating, non-judgmentally appreciating the devastating suffocation of feeling helpless in these ways or in all ways, that's a starting place for a different relationship.
And I often find it very interesting when people do present. Um, I like your language of please don't hurt me. If you know if that's the statement with inside the operating system, please don't hurt me. You're going to create all sorts of layers to survive and encountering with the world around you, which you find is utterly dangerous in so many ways, and moving towards making sense of where, like I always like to peel things back, where did that idea please don't hurt me really come from? Like, where does that live inside of you? How did that get shaped? Because often when we find how something got shaped, we start to work with the much deeper layers of what made that belief structure, that safety structure, so entrenched. Because without going for where it was entrenched, it becomes very, very difficult to shift out of anything like that. So it's actually a fantastic question, Steve. So thank you for presenting us with that, because it is yeah, it's quite interesting.
And the curiosity that you just offered is a way of demonstrating your respect for the integrity of the person that's caught in that way. And that becomes the beginning of perhaps finding a different path, a different way of staying safe in the world.
That's really nice. I'm just wondering, this came from Holly, and this is actually a really great question. Thank you for sending this in. I really have to apologize because we've got quite a lot of emails today. People are really interested in this topic, as I am. And as I mentioned before, the audience that listens to Bear Psychology Radio tend to be quite reflective and really bright, and they ask amazing questions. So I'm always excited when I get these questions. So I want to just say again to the listeners, thank you so much. If I didn't get to your question, I apologize. I usually read through all of them at the end if I don't get to them during the show. This one is from Holly, and I think we really, really need to address it. Holly says, does Douglas do live seminars? And if so, is there a schedule? And how do people get in touch with you? Because, we should know.
Oh, that's lovely. So I've been doing, showing up at places that have asked me to do workshops and so on. But I recently got asked, actually from a psychiatrist in Switzerland, if I did this, and it got me thinking to design my plan is for a 2-day training that I would offer virtually, that would be limited in scope, limited in the number of participants, and would be both an offering of a conceptual grounding, a framing of how to make sense of it, and then be very much practice based, so that have a way of putting it into practice. And that is my plan. Now, this is Holly. You've just given me another kick in the butt to get that in place. So the answer is not yet, but yes. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can do it through the website, Context Consultants, and just let me know that you're interested. I'll put you on a contact list.
Oh, that's beautiful. So I'm going to repeat that: Context Consultants with an S at the end.com for people who are interested. And also, you can find more information about Dr. Flemons on our website at bearpsychology.ca, and any of our upcoming radio shows as well. At all, we have a lot of that, and then it's going to be reposted for people who are interested, to podcasts and YouTube and all the normal places. So everybody has access to that. Okay, this one is from Howard, and I love this question, Howard. So in Dr. Flemons' 30 years in practice, what is his favorite core issue that he likes to tackle with clients?
I don't think I have a favorite core issue. Um, I love the initial encounter, as together we're discovering what it is that the person has been struggling with and what it might look like if it were to be different. And so I guess from the get-go, I don't think that the person is coming with an issue that's my job then to flesh out and deal with, but that we're together in the way that we're exploring what they're concerned about. We're arriving at an understanding that something can be done. There's an old story about Jay Haley, the inventor of strategic therapy. Michael Yapko, who at the time was a young psychologist, went to him and said, Jay, I have this patient who has dysthymia and OCD, and he lists, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 different borderline different diagnoses. And he says, I don't know, what would you do with this patient? And Jay said, I wouldn't discover that she had those problems. And so my approach with when people are coming in is to be in search of, together in dialogue, to figure out how can we come up with an understanding together, arrive at a collaborative recognition of what it is that you've come to me about, that becomes workable. That is, there's something there that can change. And how are we going to embark on that together?
That's really, really beautiful and profound, and I appreciate you saying that. We've got about 1 minute left. I guess what I wonder about is, for any of us who are listening, whatever the field is, what could we bring forward that would be most meaningful in terms of empathic engagement, whether it's from a therapy session or an EMS worker or somebody in a hospital or a clinic, talking to your best friend in a heated moment. What are we going to bring to empathic engagement?
The heart of empathy is deciding where are you going to localize your curiosity. If you localize it outside, from inside your own experience, then you've got this self-other boundary that you've got to cross. If you do the crossing yourself in your imagination and you localize your curiosity inside their story, inside their world, and then you're fleshing that out in conversation with them, they have the experience of you being an insider to their world. And as you said earlier, there's nothing more profound than that sense of not being alone. It's really something that Carl Rogers said. When you feel profoundly understood, you're no longer alone. And it's an incredible gift to give others, and it's a gift to give ourselves, because it's a fantastic place to hang out inside the worlds of other people.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad that you joined us today, Dr. Douglas Flemons, and the book is Empathic Engagement in Clinical Practice. And it was incredible hearing about the work that you're doing and also your perspective. So I appreciate it very much. And for our listeners, I want to thank you again for listening in and sharing all your thoughts. And until next time, remember that healing often begins when we feel truly seen, truly heard, and understood. I'm Dr. Anna Baranowski, and this has been the Bear Psychology Radio Show, bearing witness to mood, mind, health. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with Dr. Anna Baranowski right here on Reality Radio 101.